Hey folks, today the thing that I'm thinking about is aging, and particularly late stage aging. So if you're in the 80s and 90s, this is maybe something to think about. I think it's something for all of us to think about. So last night I had a conversation with a man who has a relative who recently died. She was in her early 90s. I don't know how long ago, but she had moved into an independent living facility. And this was the sort of home where she had a lot of room to be independent. But she also had access to care if she needed it. Family, there were several people she could call. If one didn't answer, there's another one close by. Hopefully he'll answer, so on and so forth. And she died recently, and so this guy and I were talking about how that, I hate to say end of life care, because I think end of life care usually means the very end of life, but I really mean the years leading up to the end of life. So as a real estate agent, I think about these things because I need to, and I think a lot of our population doesn't necessarily think about it until it's actually too late or really inconvenient. And so this guy was telling me that they had moved her in. She had a lot of freedom. She wasn't driving. She had her own full kitchen there in her private apartment space. She could also use a dining hall. She could eat the meal plan. She could take food from the dining hall to go in a to-go box, or have it maybe brought to her room, that sort of thing. Why am I bringing this up? We are in a time period when the baby boomers are really hitting an age and a stage that is affecting the rest of our country. And the baby boomers, even the name, there was a boom of population from their births. And so we have to think through the baby boomer population. How are you making plans for the last years? And by last years, that could be 3 years, could be 10 years, could be 20 years. It's different for all of us. I want to compare this to something like home insurance. We would love to think, my home will never burn, my home will never flood, the roof will never get damaged. That's unrealistic. That's unrealistic. Your home will get damaged. That's why we buy home insurance. Even if you don't like the whole process of home insurance, how it works, you feel like it's crooked, you still buy it. And if your home's under a mortgage, you have to have it. The same is true when you think about those latter years of your life. If you aren't making plans for those years, where you will live, then you're sort of anticipating that you will die young or younger. So I want to talk about this. I'll give you a few stories. I had some buyer clients months ago. We went to see a house, and the home that we were going to see was probably I remember it was a 1959 brick ranch home. And directly across the driveway, this is a farmland, across the driveway was you could push it over. The house was not livable, and it was really just the shell of a house. I got, in that particular instance, to speak with the sellers. That doesn't always happen, but my client, the buyer, had some questions. The sellers offered, we're happy to talk with you and answer questions. And so the wife told us, she said, my daddy built this house in 1959 before we moved in here, and I think she was young. I don't remember how old. I want to say she was 10 or 11 years old. She said, before that, we lived in that house across the driveway. And so she said, I've lived on this property my entire life, and we're ready to move. And I said, really? Do you mind if I ask why? She said, well, we want to move while we can and before we have to. That's a good thought. I said, okay, explain more of that to me. She said, well, we're in good health, and we live on this farm. We're in good health, but we're not in good enough health to keep farming. And she said, it's not going to get better. It's not like we're going to be more fit 5 years from now. And she said, we want to buy or move into some sort of retirement village or retirement community. And she said, while we have energy and we have life, she said, we want to make friends and we want to spend time with other people rather than mowing hay. And they had a pretty large set of steps going down to the basement. That's where the washer and dryer was. I think they were navigating those steps just fine. But 5 years from now, will they be? 10 years from now, will they be? And she said, I'm really sad to leave, but this is just the wise thing to do. And it's like the wise thing of buying home insurance. It's the wise thing of setting aside money for retirement. You may not make it there. You may not need it. But if you do, you'll be really glad that you made those provisions. And I've thought through this because where I'm from, and even in my own family, there's a real hesitance toward this. It's like, I'm going to stay home. End of story. And that's called aging in place. And you've decided that I'm simply going to live at home until I die. And I think historically that is what everybody did. The idea of nursing home, retirement home, independent living, the memory care, those sorts of things are all very recent in the course of human history. But we do have options now. And so I'll tell a different story. I worked with some clients at a different point in time, and I got a phone call with a representative from one of these retirement care communities, and she and I talked a little bit, and I said something about a different person entirely, and I said, she has decided to age in place. And the woman said, oh, really? And I said, she's in her mid-late 90s, and she's still home. She still lives on her own at home. Her family's involved. Her family's very involved. She doesn't drive. She doesn't cook for herself, that sort of thing. But on the whole, she still spends her nights alone, sleeping in her own bed, in her own home. And the woman who, she works in this environment of senior care, she said, well, that's respectable and that's admirable. She said, but it certainly leaves a burden for the family. And I said, well, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I don't know that burden is quite the right word. I said, it is certainly a responsibility that she has left to the family. That's what comes with aging in place, because you are then choosing, my loved ones are going to make sure for me. And I think if that is your decision, you need to think through that. Who are those loved ones? What are they signing up for? Have you had that conversation? Have you talked with them about what it means for you to reach a certain age and not be able to cook for yourself, not be able to do laundry for yourself, not be able to drive yourself, but still wish to remain in your own home? And what is the ask? Now, I'm all for honor thy father and mother. I'm all about that. I'm also all for reasonable. What's reasonable here? We can think of people who have lived a certain lifestyle where they didn't necessarily take care of the home. They didn't necessarily take care of their own health. And I realize there are people in every different situation, and we've all got things. I'm not throwing an easy blanket statement out there. I really understand. We all have things that we're struggling through. And no one got to the age and stage they are by one simple decision. It was a variety of decisions and a whole host of habits and lifestyle choices. But if you've reached a certain point where you haven't taken care of the home, you haven't taken care of your own body, your own mind, your own diet, that's a big one. And then suddenly you just expect somebody else to come, just move in with me and take care of me and clean up after me. I think that's unreasonable. And long before we reached that stage, you and your loved ones should have had a conversation around those things. What is the request? What is the expectation? That's the best question right there. What is the expectation? And is it a reasonable expectation? I understand also that there are different issues that arise depending on region. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. There are a variety of options when it comes to senior care, retirement village, independent living, assisted living, memory care, lots of options. But if you live in a very rural area, your options get limited very fast. And even if there is some sort of facility or nursing home or retirement village, there may be a long wait list. So then if you wait to the point of urgency, you still may be out of luck. This is about stewardship. This is about stewardship. And stewardship often is not about preferences. I'm going to say that again. Stewardship is often not about preferences. And we teach our children this. Your child has a $10 bill. He's going to blow that $10 bill all in one spot on something that won't last a week. It'll probably be candy or a toy that breaks. Stewardship, wisdom, comes with taking part of that money and enjoying it now, or part of that money and using it for a need that needs to be met right now. But also stewardship is taking part of that money and knowing that I may not have the money I need next week, next year, 10 years from now. I better save it. The same is true in planning your living situation as a senior adult. The message of today is not a real happy one. I know that some of you are saying, wow, this is a downer. This is responsibility. And as a real estate agent, I can step into your home and sit in your living room with you and talk with you about what are the aspects of living right now at 65, 70, 75, 80 that you're struggling with. They're not going to get better in the next 5 years. You have to make plans. And maybe, I'll give an example. My grandmother on my mom's side sold her home fairly early. I think in her years, she sold her home fairly early and then moved from she had 9 children. She moved from one child to the next. And I think for the most part, her kids were thrilled to have her in the home. And she might stay with this family for 4 months and this family for 2 weeks. It totally varied. I can speak from experience. When she came to our house, I was thrilled out of my mind. Mama was almost like a playmate. I mean, she didn't jump on the trampoline with me, but we had fun, and I loved that. And so on the one hand, I'm thrilled that she sold her house and she would come and stay with us. But I also understand that particular arrangement is not ideal for most people. And even in many cases, it might not even be feasible for most people. If you have a number of children and a number of bedrooms, we don't necessarily have enough room to add another human into that. Same with budget. Is this person moving into our home helping pay for food and utilities or not? And I know obviously we want to think about our parents and say, well, no, mommy doesn't need to pay anything. We love mommy. That's great. Some families are going to be in a position where they need mommy to kick in. She's now taking part of our home, and we are already, my mom says it's so tight that it squeaks when we walk. Money's so tight that it squeaks when we walk. I'm just giving you 1,000 different things to think about here. Like I said, in those latter years, and we keep pushing death further and further away, and yet acting like we're never going to reach it. Well, I'll die young. I won't need to worry about those latter years, where I live, who will take care of me, who will drive me, who's going to cut my hair? Do I have to drive somewhere? Will someone come to my home to cut my hair? These sorts of things, we don't like to think about them until we have to think about them. But wise stewardship says, think about them now. Have conversations. I'll close with this, and I know my video is going a little bit long today. A man called me a couple of years ago, and he said, Zach, you've never met me, and I'll leave his name out. But he told me his name, and he was right. We'd never met. He said, the pastor at my church has told me that it would be wise for me to plan my funeral ceremony before I die. And he said it would save my family members from having to do that in the urgency after I've passed away. And he said, I'd never really thought about it, but that's true. He said, my brother died, and we were in a flurry to find a preacher, to find music, to figure out who can play piano, to figure out which nursing or funeral home or which church, and all these different decisions that had to be made, wrapped up in that fraught emotion of grief. And he said, my wife and I decided right then and there, we're just going to go ahead and take care of this thing. So he called me. He had heard me sing. He said, I'd like for you to sing at my funeral. And he told me the songs he would like. And he said, and if you're out of town, if you've moved away by then, if you're unavailable, it'll be fine. He said, I won't be there anyhow. But he said, I have made the arrangements, chosen the songs. That way I save my family from having to do that. That is exactly what I'm asking you to do with your home living situation. Plan ahead. Talk with your children about the home you currently live in. Is it in mom and dad's name? Is it in the children's name? Why? Have you talked through those things? If there were an urgent emergency, somebody needs to be taken into long-term care, and the state somehow has access to those assets, do the children then lose out on those assets? These are things you should talk through with an attorney. These are very much things you should talk through as a family. Don't wait until, like I said, fraught emotion of grief, worry, sickness, tragedy. Plan ahead. Why? We could die in the next 5 minutes, but we may live many, many, many years yet to come. Okay. This is kind of a tricky conversation. I understand that. But I think it's far better to over-communicate rather than under-communicate. And like I mentioned with the example earlier, for the person who decides to just age in place, if you're going to do that, have the conversation. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying have the conversation before you do that. Rather than just hunkering down and saying it's all going to be fine, talk about it with your family, because that person in 80s, 90s, or beyond who's chosen to stay at home, I didn't like that word burden that the woman told me, but the word responsibility does fit. And those responsibilities that the individual used to carry then must be carried by someone else. Someone else is paying the bills, buying the groceries, doing the laundry, cleaning the floors, helping with a shower or a bath. The list goes on and on and on. Have that conversation. And when it comes to the actual home, by all means, have a conversation with me. I'm happy to talk with you about what options there are available, how to have that conversation with your family. It's something to do because of good stewardship. It's wisdom. It's just good wisdom. Folks, I hope you have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.